Hello, welcome back to my world of stuff. My name is Paul Mount. It's Halloween. Yeah, it's spooky season, as they call it. What better way, though, for stuff to celebrate the Halloween season with perhaps one of the greatest horror films of all time, if not the greatest horror film of all time. Certainly the most influential horror film of all time. And it's a film that I think sums up the ethos of this evening. It's the night when the undead crawl from their graves. Witches, monsters, spooky things are all around. It's the night of the living dead. Yes, hello, it's Night of the Living Dead time. I feel almost unqualified to talk about this film because I've actually only seen it twice. I watched it for the very first time 10 years ago when I picked up this DVD of the film. And by this time, I was already well immersed in zombie films because, of course, I'd seen all the 21st century zombie films. Dawn of the Dead, the classic, my favourite, Shaun of the Dead, and all the other cheap and cheerful zombie films that sprung up in the wake of this new wave of zombie movies. And I've just seen it again, only the second time I've seen it. And I know that there are people out there who've seen it hundreds of times. They've probably seen it as many times as I've seen Shaun of the Dead, if not more. And over the years, so much has been written about this film. It's been analysed and dissected, and its themes considered, and its place in genre history considered. And it is, watching it again this morning, you have to say that this is still an incredibly powerful, visceral, disturbing and scary film. Now, you know, as I keep saying, I don't scare very easily, but I can see why this film is so important and is such a significant film in the history of horror movie development. Prior to the release of this film in 1968, horror films, I think, were still regarded as a bit campy, with Hammer and a lot of the cheap and cheerful films that were coming out of America. Much as people enjoyed them, they were sort of tongue-in-cheek. You know, they were scary, they did what they did, but I don't think they were taken seriously as a legitimate cinema art form. Horror's always had its fans, its aficionados. I think that the critical community and the wider community beyond has always regarded them as a bit of silly fun, not proper films. And I think that Night of the Living Dead legitimised horror. Not only is it a classic horror film, it's actually a good film in its own right, in its making, in its creating, in its script, in its structure. It's a very well put together film that has all the beats you expect from a horror film, but it's got character moments and it's got moments that genuinely unnerve you because the thing is so well put together in terms of the beats and how it all works and how it all pays off. And of course, that staggering ending. Oh, this is a film by its nature. I'm going to have to talk about it in ways that will include some spoilers. But hey, this film is, nearly 60 years old. So if you haven't seen it yet, I'll be surprised, to be honest. But I say I've only seen it twice. And it is a film I know I will go back to more frequently now because watching it again, you realise just how good it is and how important it is. And I keep going back to words like important and iconic, but it really is. It closes off a specific era of horror films, and I think I mentioned this in my review of Blood on Satan's Claw recently. Horror was changing, and the changes began with this film, and as I mentioned again, Rosemary's Baby and certain other films that came out in that time. Horror was legitimising itself by putting away the cheap thrills and going for something a bit more harder-edged, tougher and bloodier. It's an astonishing film for its time, made, as you will know, on a shoestring, made with passion by people who wanted to see if they could make a low-budget film in the local community around Pennsylvania. George Romero, who wrote and directed the film with his friend Joe Russo, they crafted a film and drew in help from all their friends and family and collaborators and people they knew in the industry to make this film on a pittance, basically. A film that went on to gross in its original release alone 30 million, making what I believe is said to be 250 times its original budget, making it at the time one of the most profitable films of all time. Certainly one of the most profitable horror films. What makes the film work then as a piece of cinema, as a horror film? Well, it's it's the whole thing, the whole package, really. But one of the things that strikes me most is the fact that this was made in 1967 and it's in black and white. That was probably for budgetary reasons, but that makes it so atmospheric. George Romero was able to make fantastic use of shadows and interiors and the darkness of the night outside, because we don't really understand what's out there. We don't understand what this threat really is. There have been zombie films before this, of course, and of course we must remember again that they're never called zombies in this film. They're referred to as ghouls, and most people I think of ghouls as sort of spooky ghosts and things. But they're referred to as ghouls and not zombies. They're reanimated corpses. They are creatures that have been brought back to life by apparently radiation from a space probe that's returned from Venus. And that's something new. As I said, we'd had zombie films back before in the 30s. Not long before this, we'd had Hammer's excellent Plague of the Zombies, but that's very much more a play on Haitian sort of voodoo zombies. I don't think I need to go into the story too much, really, do I? I will anyway, because I think that sort of thing's always useful. The beginning of the film, the first 5-10 minutes are incredibly iconic. I mean, it's hard to watch those scenes and not think of Shaun of the Dead, but it's hard to think of these scenes and not realise how incredibly striking and powerful they are. As siblings Barbara and Johnny travel to a cemetery, Evans Cemetery in Pennsylvania, to place a wreath on their late father's grave. Johnny doesn't really want to be there, as he says he didn't even know his father very well. The trip takes them 6 hours there and back. They're not going to get home before midnight. But as Barbara is placing the wreath, we see in the background this figure sort of wandering through the back of the cemetery. It's really well done. This man who's sort of shambling, he doesn't look quite right. And we know that there's something wrong. Johnny starts to take the mickey out of Barbara because she's always been slightly spooked out by being in the cemetery. And then she gets attacked by this creature, this ghoul. Now, at this stage, the zombies aren't what we recognise as zombies today from The Walking Dead and all the other zombie films and TV shows we've seen. They're not these cadaverous... Well, they are cadaverous, but they're not streaked in body parts. They're not covered in blood yet. They're not falling apart. Basically, this first guy we meet just looks like this slightly scruffy bloke. He's very pallid and very pale, but he attacks Barbara with his ferocity. Johnny jumps in to defend her. He gets knocked over and hits his head on a gravestone. We don't know at that stage if he's dead or unconscious or what's going to happen to him. Barbara, of course, in a panic, she flees, gets back to the car. This creature, this ghoul, chases her. She eventually crashes the car and runs into the forest. She stumbles across this deserted house. She goes into the house. And it's interesting that throughout the film, she's absolutely traumatized by this. She's almost catatonic. She can't communicate properly. And that's really well done, because in a lot of horror films, terrible things happen and people are terrified and horrified, and then they snap out of it and they just get back to normal. But all the way through the film, Barbara is completely traumatized. And just, as I say, she just sits there shivering and she can't believe what's going on. She doesn't understand it. The house is quickly surrounded by these creatures, these ghouls, and then she's joined by Ben, played by Dwayne Jones. He's a loner. He's very streetwise. He knows how to look after himself, and he starts boarding up the house. What's so noticeable about the casting of Dwayne Jones, of course, as Ben, is that here we have a black actor as a leading man in a feature film. This didn't happen at this time. Very rarely did this happen. We had actors like Sidney Poitier, and we had Harry Belafonte, but they were still marginalised, and we didn't get black characters, black leading characters. So this is a real touchstone picture in the development of sort of the racial movement of black people moving forward in the industry. And it's an interesting casting choice. And I believe it wasn't done purposely because he was black. It was because he fitted the role and he gave the best performance. And that's why he's here. And it's a great performance. He's very much the everyman. He's very much the hero figure. He's the one who will, we hope, save the day. He has the ideas about boarding up the house. He's the one with a singular vision. He's the one who's not been totally fazed by what's going on. Barbara's out of it. He's trying to get through to her, but he can't. The creatures are circling the house. Then they discover that there are more people hiding in the cellar. We've got Harry Cooper, the bullish Harry Cooper, and his wife Helen. Their daughter Karen has been injured, so we discover. And we also discover a couple, Tom and Judy. These people have all come together because they've heard these emergency broadcasts that are on the radio and on TV about these creatures that are roaming. And there are sheriff's departments coming together to form posses to sort of shoot these creatures and destroy them. Meanwhile, our heroes, our characters are trapped in the house, and the situation gets increasingly worse. There are tensions between them. Harry doesn't like being bossed around by Dwayne. He wants them all to stay in the cellar. Ben thinks that they've got better chances up in the upper part of the house because they've got food and resources. They can see what's going on. They all hope that rescue will come. And as we know, we've seen the film, we know what happens, and things don't work out the way that anybody wants them to work out. There are deaths, and they're affecting deaths as well, because with some quite neat grace notes, we get to know these characters quite well. And as I said, there are spoilers here, is the sequence where Ben, Tom and Judy leave the house, take the truck and try to refill it from a petrol pump that's in the grounds of the farm building that they're in. They use Molotov cocktails to keep the ghouls at bay, but unfortunately one of them ignites the truck and it explodes with Tom and Judy in it. And it's a shame because they're a nice young couple. What makes it even worse is that we then see a scene a bit later on with the ghouls descending on the smoking remains of the truck and feasting on the barbecued bodies within. I mean, we don't see the bodies explicitly, but we see some very explicit, nasty scenes of them chewing on flesh and bones and entrails and so on. And that's quite, even now, it's affecting and it's shocking and it's unpleasant. It's such a powerful, resonant film. I don't think it's too wide of the mark to suggest that the history of horror films at the cinema, there's a sense that there's the films that came before Night of the Living Dead and the films that came afterward. And I think that Night of the Living Dead and other films that were made around that time changed the face of horror and made it a more legitimate form of cinema that people took a bit more seriously, no matter how extreme some of the subject matter may have been. It also gave us the shuffling zombies, of course, the moaning, shuffling zombies, much beloved by fans of zombie cinema, as opposed to the faster-paced running zombies that we've seen in certain other productions. But I think what it does, it has a very pleasing aesthetic in that there's a balance between the horror of these creatures and what they do, their cannibalistic tendencies, and the humans, the people that we care about, the characters who are developed enough for us to care when things happen to them and when they're in danger and when they die. And that's a mistake that I think a lot of subsequent zombie films have done, which are focused on the zombie hordes and the killings and the fights and the gunfights, and you don't care about the people. I think it's something that the new Walking Dead spin-off series has addressed by developing quite complex stories and characters, but still obviously with the zombie kills that we're there for. But I think there has been a tendency in some productions to focus on the, look what we can do, look at these scenes of intestines being spilt, of heads being ripped apart, blood and gore, limbs being hacked off. That's all well and good, but it doesn't mean anything if the characters involved in the story are just ciphers or bland characters that we just can't invest in. And I think what Night of the Living Dead does in terms of zombie films not only kickstarts that genre, but it remembers to create people as well as monsters. Romero went on to do Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and we had various other zombie films. And then it was in the 21st century that it all sort of exploded and everybody was doing zombies. The Walking Dead. There's a series now actually on Channel 4, which I recommend if you haven't seen it, by Ben Wheatley, Generation Z. All these things, all these zombie films and books and comics and TV shows, they all directly link back to Night of the Living Dead. It made all this stuff happen. And it's an incredible achievement. And as I said, I feel unqualified to talk about it because so many people have written books about it and looked at it and looked at the themes. It's a story about survival. It's a story about the beginning of the end of the world, as we discovered that this is through the later films. And it's gut-wrenching, literally, horror film, which is a masterpiece of cinema in any genre. It's so well made. The final sequence, and I'm drifting very, very deep into spoiler territory here. You know what happens, but if anybody hasn't seen it, I won't spoil the absolute ending. But the final sequence, which rolls over stark black and white images of a funeral pyre being built and a soundtrack of people, the sheriff's people, just talking about killing these creatures. It has, parts of it have a sort of a documentary feel as well, certainly the bits where we see the sheriff and his men getting their posses together and being interviewed by a news reporter. There's so much in here that became so influential for things later down the line. It's incredible to think of how much this film created from this one particular story, this one particular movie. It's a hell of a good film, and if you've not seen it, foolishly, George Romero and his team did not copyright it, which is why you can find lots of videos. This one I picked up a few years ago, DVD version. It's come out on video. It's come out on numerous DVDs, basically because it's in the public domain. Anybody can release this on video or DVD, which is why there have been so many different versions. It's now getting the respect it deserves on Blu-ray editions and so on. But you can find a copy of it out there. It's on YouTube. And it's beyond highly recommended because it is such an important benchmark and such an important footprint in the development of modern horror. I would say that we owe everything we have in modern cinema, zombie films, or not zombie films, to Night of the Living Dead. It's an astonishing film, and of course, I'm going to give it 10 out of 10 because it is an absolute stone cold classic. Right, thank you for watching this video. I do hope that you feel I did this film justice. As I say, it's very hard because it's such an important film. So many people watch it again and again and they cherish it. It set off so many creative minds in so many different directions. I can just talk from my perspective, having only seen it twice. I'll be watching it again before too long, that's for sure. I can see how it's such an important film that impassions so many people. Terrific. Right, thank you for watching this video. If you've just stumbled across it, enjoy your Halloween. If you watch it after Halloween, I hope you enjoyed your Halloween. Why not like and subscribe? I noticed from my analytics, which I'm starting to get the hang of, a lot of people are watching videos but not subscribing. So come on, just press that subscribe button. You don't have to watch the videos, but I hope you will. There's loads of stuff, all sorts of genres back on my channel. Classic TV, cult TV, new films, old films. Everything and anything is here on this channel. So like and subscribe and stick around. Thank you for watching. I'll see you soon. Until I do, yeah, keep taking the stuff.